What is the most ducking useless thing that they teach in school? That if someone's bullying you, you tell them that you don't like it. Like no shit. That's why they do it. I was waiting in the office for a counselor's appointment in 9th grade, and this kid that I didn't know decided to lay into me and make fun of absolutely everything about me. I wasn't making eye contact. I just kept shaking my head no and looking at all the office workers who heard him, but ignored it and said nothing. As soon as I got into my counselor's office, I started sobbing. This kid had absolutely broken me. The counselor was visibly uncomfortable with me crying and was like, "Do you want to talk to him? Let's get him in here and talk it out." Apostrophe. I was like, no. Why would I want him to know what he did to me? Exclamation mark. Apostrophe. To which the counselor replied, "So you two can be buds after this." Apostrophe. I was like, yay. Let's let the bully know that his tactics have worked. And I'm even closer to killing myself now than ever, which is why I was going to the counselor's office in the first place. Fuck that shit. Glad I never have to do high school again, because I wouldn't make it out alive a second time. I seriously don't get that. How can school staff legitimately think, hey, this kid's getting bullied? They would certainly make good friends. This plan couldn't duck up in any way. Zero tolerance policy is the dumbest thing ever taught and implemented. All it teaches is to fear authority when you're the victim. It enables the perpetrator, who is normally a bully. I know administrators are lazy fucks, but they need to actually investigate the goddamn problem instead of saying, "Hey, you both were involved in the issue, so you're both going to get punished." It basically just raises you to hate authority. And while I don't like authorities either, I don't think they're all distrustful. Although, I guess this could be interpreted as commentary on how garbage authority is. It also escalates situations. You're getting the same punishment if you retaliate or not. So you better make sure they think twice before starting shit with you again. I do not want to say this and strongly advocate against violence, but this unfortunately lead to such conclusion. Indeed. Memorizing the periodic table. It's a table. There is no need to memorize it. All the info is there already. Every single day in chemistry class, there was a huge poster on the wall with the periodic table on it, big enough to read from any seat in the room. Except one day. The one day we had to take a test on how well we'd memorized it. Then they covered it with a sheet. You see, it was absolutely essential we remember the molecular number of molybdenum. For all those hypothetical other times when we wouldn't just be able to look up on the wall and see it. Our elementary school was heavy into unicycles. Jim CL Butty around was learning to ride, then ride together, and in formation. I was one of the unlucky few who never got it. I can't dance or ride a bike either, so I suspect there's some balance issues. School all but threatened to hold me back a year until I learned how. Everyone forgot and never picked it up again as soon as they moved to middle school. Worst part is that we were a very poor school in a very rural area without much funding. I can't imagine how much the school spent on those unicycles. There was no sponsorship, and we weren't competing in anything. Edit. This was in a public school in Western Washington state in the late 80s. But I think some other schools nearby did this too. Nearby high school is Mount CHS Acker, the actual Twin Peaks HS. Not even remotely kidding. In my PSEL Budwa learned Nordic pole walking, with a special emphasis on the technique. You know when you see old ladies walking with those ski poles. That was us at age 15. The kicker was that I went to an all-girls school, and they made us do laps around the neighboring all-boys school with our poles. So not only was it useless but also humiliating. Edit. Thank you to those in the comments who reminded me it was Nordic pole walking. I'm not sure where I got nomadic from. Clearly I wasn't paying attention during that unit. Not exactly something they teach in general, but in my high school music class, we had to memorize our national anthem in a different language. We used to be a colony, and it was originally written in the colonizer's language, and then sing it out loud with the same melody and all. Except you're parroting a bunch of words that you don't understand. Over a decade later, and I still think it was a pointless exercise. What country are you from? Probably from the Philippines. I had that to learn our national anthem in Spanish, and in English too in high school. my old high school decided that PE wasn't important, and instead of having 2 periods where we would be exercising and learning about the human body, they made us take spiritual development. I hated my old high school. Sounds like they took the high part very seriously. I'm convinced all high school teachers are just hippies who want to go on recruiting missions. I'll chime in from a teacher's perspective. A lot of what I teach is to eventually prepare students for calculus, yet most of my students will never take that class. So instead of having fun in math and exploring pattern/properties/problem solving and reasoning/logic, we have to make students memorize everything, since we have too much to teach. Memorize this formula. No, we don't have time to explore how to derive it in any meaningful way. Plug numbers into here. No, we don't have time to figure out what these numbers mean nor their significance in the world. This stuff is useful in the real world. No, we don't have time to actually explore that stuff. Here's a fake real world problem instead. This math revolutionized the world when it was discovered. No, we don't have time to explore why most kids who struggle with math, in my experience, struggle because they don't have a concrete understanding. It's just memorize math facts and learn to plug the correct numbers into the equation. I'm guilty of all of these sins as a teacher, but the job ahead of me really makes it difficult to do fun stuff in math. There's a long list of reasons why students feel school isn't worth it, and I'm with them in many cases. What we can't fail to forget, though, is school is better than no school. At my school we do many things poorly, but poorly done is better than not done at all. So yes, room for improvement, but please don't give up on the school system. Edit. I don't teach calculus. I teach high school math, and the curriculum and standards push kids as if they will be taking calculus and beyond, which is great. That has a place in school. But 80% of students won't take calculus, so why do we teach math to them as if they will? I'm just a low-level newbie teacher, not an expert or someone who has any real authority on the subject. Square dancing. It was put into the curriculum at US schools after heavy lobbying from industrialist Henry Ford. He didn't like the awful new modern dances people were doing, like the Charleston. I remember when they said we were doing square dancing for a semester, everyone groaned and bitched and said how stupid it was at first. Then by the end of the semester a lot of people were having to hide their enjoyment of it. Plus a lot of those kids wouldn't otherwise get a chance to interact with the opposite sex. I'm from Texas, and in Texas history CL Budwa learned way too much about the Battle of the Alamo. Do you remember the Alamo? Apparently he does. Indeed. To ask to go to the bathroom. I don't know. Can you? Every time a teacher said that to me, I was so tempted to say, let's find out, and just piss everywhere. But I knew it wouldn't end well. In Phys Ed they had us take actual written tests a few times sitting on the gym floor. Questions like where was basketball invented? What are the rules of pickle? Yada yada. Other useless shit. I took our intro to bowling CL but in college as an elective, and we had to have an actual final written exam with questions like where was bowling invented. I took bowling in college, and it was nothing more than going down to the local lanes a couple times a week to throw some balls, drink some beers, and smoke a whole lot of cigarettes. As you may have deduced, this was more than a few years ago. That if we cover our shoulders and legs, boys will stop looking at us. Saudi Arabia must be just full of men who are hyper focused on the task at hand and not looking up weird porn. Wait, they could save a lot of resources by making men wear blindfolds when in mixed company rather than having women raped crown to toe. You get people in this thread saying teaching algebra or proofs is useless and simultaneously demanding that schools should teach critical thinking. About a year ago my boss, a 55-year-old very thrifty woman, was sitting at her desk trying to figure out which box of K-cups was the cheapest per cup to buy, shortly after a coworker of mine who was going back to college was complaining about her college algebra course. My boss then starts on a rant about how these math courses are completely useless and proceeds to say, direct quote, "Why do they teach students to solve for X? I've never solved for X in my life. It took 3 grown butt adults, of which I'm the youngest at 39, 15 minutes to convince her that she had been solving for X when calculating the cost of the K-cups. I feel like some people have hard times abstract real world concepts down to variables." not to chew gum. On a more serious note, that hugging and public displays of affection are bad. Ask me how many times I got detention because of this. Chewing gum is probably not an educational rule, but rather a custodial rule. Those guys don't get paid enough to scrape off your nasty chewed up gum. As a teacher, the number of times I put my fingers in someone's old chewed gum just because I tried to move a table or chair was far too high. In my country we do religion. And don't you dare argue with a teacher or ask any questions cause Jesus is the only answer. I'm from Romania and we do 1 hour of religion per week. And it's the most useless, boring and annoying hour of the week. We had written finals for PE. It was so ridiculous that even the PE teachers didn't really bother reading our answers while grading the exams. Example questions. A friend of mine answered, describe the history of the football with an elaborate answer about how a guy stuck on an island kicked a coconut and due to a quantum anomaly, his foot fused with the coconut. This led to the birth of the legend of the football. Another friend answered what is an aerobic exercise with a drawing of a man doing push-ups in the presence of a chemistry set creating oxygen via hydrogen peroxide, and drew arrows to them labeling the reaction and the push-ups as aerobic and exercise respectively. Another friend answered a question about things to keep in mind when trying to eat a balanced diet for health with points, like try not to eat a brick wall. Only one of them failed. One of them had their final exam sheet framed. I want to hope that it was the aerobic exercise that had failed. It'd be funny for the other two to pass, even though the aerobic exercise was probably the closest answer to being correct. It actually was him that failed. Hard to get away with a diagram. The others just passed because nobody bothered to read the answers. D-A-R-E was the single worst ducking useless thing ever taught at school, especially when the cop teaching said CL but ends up getting arrested for coke. Abstinence only sex ed. Imagine if driver's ed just told you the only way to avoid an accident is to never drive a car. Both equally useless because A. You can get raped while practicing abstinence, and B. You can still get hit by a car even if you never drive one. There are likely a wide variety of answers you get from this question, but education isn't necessarily meant to provide just a means to an end, i.e. something useful. Education is about broadening our view of the world, teaching us what all is out there, and showing us there is so much more than what we see inside these four walls. Teaching us about what astronauts do on the ice isn't very useful information for many of us, but it's incredibly interesting, and it shows us that there is amazing value in exploration, discovery and further learning. Earth is an ever-changing and beautiful planet, and its inhabitants are even more fascinating and entertaining. We'd likely never know any of this if we didn't study and learn about everything that's here. Yes, some of it is kinda boring and maybe useless, but it all adds to the depth and breadth of our ability to think critically and more objectively about all things. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all the colorful emoji thinges. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. I've never gotten any of these before. Most of the BS I peddle on Reddit just crashes and burns at the bottom of the thread about 10 seconds after I hit save. That was my initial thought as well, and I was ready to come into this thread and be outraged by the responses. Then I read Unicicle, and yeah, that's fair. It's less useless and more actively harmful, but the way drugs education was taught when I was growing up was straight up nonsense. All drugs are bad. Okay, alcohol is also a drug, and it can definitely kill you, but it's also fine for some reason. Don't question it. And weed is just as bad as heroin. All you need to know is that anyone who even looks at a joint is a morally repugnant junkie and they are destined to have more children than teeth on some council estate, or will rob old ladies to fund their deplorable habit. And that's if you don't straight up die from even being in the same room as weed smoke. The police definitely have your best interests at heart when they arrest you, so you should knock on anyone you know who might be doing drugs, because jail is the better alternative and it's always for your own good. Oh, and don't worry about what happens when you actually try drugs, because even though you might find a GL butt of wine or an edible is actually pretty great, you're almost certainly going to start to wonder if maybe heroin and meth aren't that bad either. Are they? Can you trust your teachers? Who fucking knows? Also, I was led to believe that way more people would offer me drugs that I could just say no to than ever have in my life. Drugs are expensive, y'all. Someday, someone is going to come up to you and ask if you want to do drugs. They'll make it seem like it's cool and fun. You should just say no. It's that simple. Just say no. Otherwise, you'll end up in jail. Doing 20 years. Because you got high that one time. Apostrophe. That experience never happened. Not even close. It's almost never strangers. Pretty much no random person is going to come up and offer to give you drugs. Sell them to you. Maybe. But almost never just give them to you. The only people I've ever had offer me drugs were friends, and I just politely decline and they don't offer again. That the female body will shut down during rape and she won't get pregnant. Thus babies cannot be conceived during rape. Catholic grammar school. Northern Ireland. Fucking useless. Factually and ethically wrong. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.